Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast series. My name is Ahnaf Kalam and I will be moderating today's discussion. Now, the Turkish state is currently engaged in an initiative to address its Kurdish question. This effort, marked by symbolic gestures like the recent handshake between ultranationalist leaders and pro-Kurdish PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan announcing the dissolution of his movement and the PKK Congress confirming this, is unfolding amid shifting domestic and regional dynamics. Today, we explore the text, conditions, and timing of this process, tracing the historical failures to solve the Kurdish-Turkish conflict, Turkey's tight control over every facet of the current initiative, and its apparent focus on marginalizing Kurdish political voices rather than resolving the issue. Is Turkey genuinely seeking peace, or is it merely consolidating power at the expense of Kurdish aspirations? Now, to answer these questions and more, we are joined today by Dr. Weysi Dag, who is an author and a research fellow in the Department of International Relations at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Now, as always, we invite your questions throughout this discussion, and if you have a question, please feel free to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Weysi Dag. It's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anad, for having me today.
Yeah, of course. Now, just to begin and sort of set here, would you mind giving us a sort of bird's eye overview of the situation with Turkey and the PKK?
Yes, of course. The Kurdish conflict in Turkey remains one of the most complex and long-standing issue in the Middle East as part of a broader Kurdish question that spans 4 states: Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria, reflecting the divided geography of the Kurdish population. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen a moment of significant change for the Kurds. The fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003 opened space for Kurdish autonomy in Iraq. The Syrian conflict in 2011 similarly created a new political reality for the Kurds. Many now wonder whether Iran may be the next and whether Turkey represents a final and most difficult chapter in this unfolding process. In this context, the recent decision by the PKK to disarm and begin the process of self-dissolution is highly significant. While some interpret it as a step toward peace, others see it as a part of broader strategy by Turkish state to limit the potential for Kurdish political transformation and influence in the Middle East. Historically, Turkey has taken a hardline approach to Kurdish identity with deep-rooted policies of denial, assimilation, and repression. This legacy continues to shape the relationship between the Turkish state and its Kurdish population today. At the same time, there are growing debate within the Kurdish political spheres about how to engage with Turkish state. Some Kurdish politicians and elites have aligned closely with the Turkish state's institutions. Critics argue that this risks marginalizing broader Kurdish demands and alienating part of the own Kurdish communities. These are sensitive and contested questions, both politically and morally, and they deserve a careful reflection. So with that, let's explore some of major development in Turkey and the wider region. Abdullah Öcalan, the founder of the PKK, enters talk with Turkish intelligence and other state authorities while in solitary confinement on Imral, Iceland. This talk took place entirely behind closed doors with little transparency. Following these developments, Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of Turkey's ultranationalist party, made a symbolic gesture by shaking hands with pro-Kurdish members of parliament. He then publicly called on Öcalan to declare an end to the armed Kurdish struggle and to dissolve the PKK. Many observers interpreted this act as the beginning of a new political process, although its details remained unclear at the time. Shortly afterwards, the delegation from the pro-Kurdish DEM party visited Öcalan multiple times. Then on February 27, 2025, Öcalan made a rare and notable public statement. He urged the PKK to abandon its long-standing demands, such as statehood, federalism, autonomy, and even cultural rights. Instead, he encouraged his organization to shift its focus towards broader ideologically universalistic and utopian principles, such as building a democratic society and promoting socialism. Öcalan also called on the PKK to convene a congress to formally lie down its arms and dissolve the organization. His appel emphasized a transition from armed struggle to peaceful legal and political engagement. In May, the PKK held a congress where it officially declared an end to its armed struggle and entrusted Öcalan with the responsibility of guiding the transition process. However, the PKK itself was not directly involved in the broader negotiations. Instead, it appeared to follow Öcalan's lead without participating as equal stakeholders in the talks. While many Kurds welcome the shift from armed conflict to political path, there are also concerns. Some worry that this development signals a departure from long-standing Kurdish goals and aspirations. With the PKK stepping back from its previous central role, there's now an opportunity and perhaps a responsibility for broader Kurdish society to engage with and help shape the future of Kurdish questions. Despite the PKK's unilateral decisions to lie down arms, the Turkish government has not addressed the deeper, long-standing roots of the Kurdish issue, an issue that affects a million more than combined population in Iraq and Syria. Instead, the government framed this development as the start of a terror-free Turkey, simplifying what is in reality deeply complex political and national matter into a counterterrorism narrative. Turkey has demanded full disarmament and compliance, but so far has offered no reciprocal steps in return. The government appears to applying a similar approach to Kurdish groups in Rojava and Iran. However, Kurdish forces in those regions have made clear that Öcalan's recent appel does not apply to them, and they continue to advocate for federalism and political recognition. So far, Turkey has not initiated a transparent, legal, or constitutional process, nor has it opened the door to fair and inclusive negotiation or international mediation, mechanisms that have played key roles in other peace processes, such as in South Africa, Colombia, or Northern Ireland. Efforts towards legal and political reforms remain limited. The government has not implemented the judicial reforms it previously promised, and there have been no meaningful step towards reconciliation. Meanwhile, military operations have continued and political discourse remain heavily focused on security rather than inclusion or dialogue. So what are Turkey's broader objectives in this process? They span domestic, regional, and international dimensions. Domestically, the government appears to have several political aims. It seeks to secure Kurdish support for a new constitution that would serve the evolving need of the Turkish state. It also aimed to strengthen President Erdogan's prospect for re-election, at the same time while promoting democratic reforms in rhetoric, and the Erdogan regime continued to detain democratically elected Kurdish and Turkish mayors, raising concern about political inclusivity and representations. Regionally, especially following the geopolitical shift after October 7 atrocities, Turkey is focused on preventing Kurdish forces in northern Syria, Rojava, from gaining further influence in the region where Iranian-backed actors are weakening. It seeks to limit the Kurdish autonomy in Rojava, reassert its role as dominant regional actors, and in doing so, Turkey revives elements of its historical influence in relation to neo-Ottomanism. Turkey is also working to expand its reach in key areas such as Syria and Iraq, with broader strategic ambition that includes symbolic influence over Jerusalem. Internationally, Turkey aimed to avoid external criticism regarding its approach to the Kurdish issue and present itself as a stable, unified, and powerful state on the global stage that can solve many international conflicts, such as Turkish role in the conflict of Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. Within the Kurdish political spheres, we are witnessing a cautious but notable sense of unity, perhaps more so than we have seen in decades. There have been some encouraging development. Many Kurdish groups expressed their commitment to unity through a congress held in Rojava on April 26. They believe that given recent shift, Turkish Turkey's rationale for continuing military operation in Rojava and the Kurdistan region of Iraq is becoming harder to justify, and that the legitimacy of Turkish military presence in Kurdish region of Iraq and Syria is increasingly questioned. There's also hope that displaced Kurdish communities in this area may begin to return, and that economic cooperation with Turkey, particularly through Kurdistan region of Iraq, could improve. However, consensus remains if this newfound unity is perceived as an effort to marginalize or sideline the PKK, it could be counterproductive. There is a risk that Turkey may still find new justification for further military action or political suppression, which could undermine the broader goal of peaceful coexistence and regional stability. The disbandment of the PKK also carries important international implications. This development may enhance the global legitimacy of Kurdish political movement and help improve the broader international image. It also challenges the continued use of the terrorist label applied to various Kurdish actors and could help remove a long-standing diplomatic obstacle that may in the Kurdish diaspora have faced in international forums and discussions. To conclude, the end of the PKK's armed struggle marks a significant and historic moment. However, this does not represent a comprehensive resolution without an inclusive political process, one that incorporates diverse Kurdish voice, a clear legal framework, and meaningful international engagement. The path to lasting peace remain uncertain. So I know actually this is my talk, and I look forward to having a question and respond to your questions or questions of audience.
Ah, well, fantastic. Many thanks for your presentation. We do have a few questions coming in here, so I will begin with a question from Carrie Hillebrand, who asks, could you update the status of the Kurdish SFD vis-a-vis the PKK and Turkey?
SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, is right now engaged in a negotiation with the regime in Damascus, al-Shara regime, and actually the representative of the Kurdish forces or Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces argued that this negotiation is kind of influenced by the process between Turkey and Öcalan. So, and now the SDF tries to get yesterday, that was the last time that they had the meeting to negotiate with the Damascus regime, and also the US is involved, we know that. They negotiate, and this is a process, like we know that Mazlum Kobani and al-Shara has already signed a memorandum on March 10, and now they negotiate how to implement this memorandums, but the role of the SDF will remain crucial in New Syria.
Thank you. Now, a follow-up question also from Carrie. How has the relationship between the SDF and Israel shifted?
As Mazlum Kobani, the General Mazlum, yesterday or the day before yesterday, declared that there are no direct ties between Israel and SDF, but there are very positive sentiments that actually reflect also the view of the Kurdish population and the desire a very stable and dynamic relationship. But given the geopolitical and sensitive issues in Syria, and also Turkish threat, both sides are also careful. But as I said, it's very, both the Kurds, also the other representative of the Kurds, the Kurdish administration declared that the role of Syria, that Syria has to promote peace with all of its neighbors within the framework of Abraham Accords, and this is also the approach, even though that has been written in the media many times that the Kurds in Rojava, the representative of the Kurds, they actually are very supportive of Abraham Accord, and they want that Syria joins the Abraham Accord at some point. So, and this is also something, because the Abraham Accord is the treaty which is crucial for the Middle East to promote peace. And promote peace and equality and the threat, and this is also crucial for the course. And the course in Rojava in particular have already implemented the spiritual aspect of this treaty, because we have multi-ethnic, multi-religious, very inclusive model in Rojava, and this is exactly what the core aspect of Abraham Accords represents. So, and based within this framework, we have very positive sentiment and understanding, and also understanding of security concerns and other concerns. But as I said, officially, because the issue is very sensitive, but also because of Turkey and also the Turkish intervention, because the Turkey in particular, like anti-Semitism, extremely on rise, and they always demonize Israel and the Jews, and they connect the Kurds in order to criminalize the Kurds. And that's why the Kurds are very careful. And the Israeli official, I believe, are also careful. They are aware of this fact and they understand. So, but all in all, they have very positive sentiment. And I hope at some point that will be implemented within the framework of the Abraham Accord.
Thank you. Now, I will move on to a question here from the Middle East Forum's founder and chairman, Daniel Pipes, who asks, can Rojava survive Turkish opposition?
I mean, Rojava has resisted many times, and Turkey invaded multiple times Rojava. They invaded Afrin in 2018, then Serikanye in 2019, and Turkey committed ethnic cleansing. But also Turkey tried to invade other part of Rojava because the Turkish objective was to remove the Kurdish forces 30 kilometers away from the Turkish borders. But the Kurds have always resisted, actually. But now, because the Kurds rely on they made also a statement that they rely on their own forces. They will fight. They are well trained, well experienced. But it's not about I think the confrontation on the field, that's armed confrontation on the field. I don't think that will remain a very relevant issue now, for now at least, because there's negotiation. Americans are involved. They try to solve many issues in the diplomatic way. So, but if the American withdraw themselves and then if Turkey invade, probably the course like they did in Afrin and in Serikanye, they will resist, but I cannot, it's very hypothetical and speculative to tell how the outcome will look like. But the course in Rojava, as they already made statement that they will resist, that they rely on their own people. But Turkey, even in Tishrim, Turkey tried to take it over after the fall of Bashar regime, December 8, 2014. And Turkey tried multiple times, but the Kurds also resisted the Turkish invasion and also the deployment. It resisted also the deployment of the jihadists that the Turkey used as proxy, like they call it the Syrian Free Army. So, and that's why it's very hypothetical, but it's now the talk, we have negotiation, a lot of speculation that we hear reportedly, and I hope that will not come to the confrontation, and they will use the mind to, through dialogue to promote peace, and this is something that the region needs. But at the end, we don't know. Like the Middle East is something that things changing every day.
Yep, every day, never a boring moment there. Moving on here to a Konsari. He asks, how, in your view, is the new situation with the PKK seen in Iran? Are the Iranians happy about this? Is there any truth to Turkish support for certain Kurdish opposition activities against the Iranian regime?
I mean, the course now, the PEJAK, this is the branch that represents the Kurds, and many claim that this kind of wing of the PKK in Iran. And recently, they made a statement that the Öcalan cause does not apply to them, and they organize they start to recruit on the social media. We could follow that they start recruiting people to prepare that they will respond in case if there's a vacuum of power in the region. But for the Turkey wants also, when it's up to Turkey, all the Kurdish groups in the region, whether in Syria or Iran or somewhere else, in Turkey anyways, there are very marginal groups, I guess, that they have to disarm and dissolve themselves, because Turkey does not tolerate any kind of armed forces, but also representation of the Kurds in general. But all in all, the Kurds actually press for a kind of vacuum of power, because the Iranian regime, even though they made the threaten every day the American and all Israel and any other forces, but in my opinion, they don't have the power, and it's very shaky. And it's, I think, the matter of time that this regime may fall. And the Kurds already they prepare themselves, they organize themselves, and to respond to the Iranian regime, to fill the vacuum. And we also know, when in 2012, 2022, when the Iranian regime killed Amina Jini, the Kurdish female citizens, and there were the Kurdish groups, like multiple Kurdish groups, PKK, Komala, they call for boycott, and they actually they started this uprising with the motto of Jinjian Azadi, woman, life, and freedom.
Freedom. Yep.
That was a very this movement challenged the Turkish, the Iranian regime, and of course now they look for opportunity to respond to the Iran, to any vacuum. But the Turkey, as I said, Turkey wants to marginalize this group as well, because for Turkey, there's no way that the Kurds can have a kind of a legal status in the region.
Sure, sure. Now, something you touched on in your remarks here. Can you elaborate further on the sort of divide where we have Turkey and President Erdogan, whose stance on the Kurds is very clear. He's no fan of the Kurds. And meanwhile, we have the Turkish-backed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria, seemingly more open and, at least on the surface, seemingly more neutral to the Kurds and Kurdish autonomy than certainly than Turkey is. Can you talk more about this divide?
I think, what I think that the Shara regime is a kind of proxy of the Turkey. Like Turkey dictate and they implement, but they try to play as nice guys to get legitimacy, to get support, and to some extent they manage to succeed in getting the support from the President Trump, for example, and many Arab countries, of course, are also lobbying for them. So, and even though, I mean, this kind the Turkey, but Turkey has a most influence on the regime, and without Turkey, I think if it wasn't not Turkey, there's a kind of resolution between the Kurdish question in Syria and the kind of I would say agreement and stability would have been much easier. But it is the Turkey that Turkey prevents this actually, to prevent the Damascus regime, like al-Shara regime, to to how to behave towards the Kurds, and even Erdogan and also other officials of the Turkish state, they declared that the Kurds have to integrate the force. They have to integrate into the Syrian army, which doesn't exist. There's no Syrian army actually. There's no Syrian state. So, but for them to integrate into what? To dissolve themselves as well. That's what Turkey wants, to eliminate any kind of power. So, and the Damascus, al-Shara, they had a few meetings, but these meetings, like what they draw the red line that the Kurds should not demand the federalism or any source of autonomy, but we will recognize the certain rights, basic rights, that they can speak the language. So, but this is also kind of not stable. And this is the process. This is the part of the process. So they are negotiating all this aspects. But as I said, the Turkey plays a very negative role in general in preventing the regime in Damascus to come to terms with the Kurds, Kurdish forces in particular. And this is the Turkey. If Turkey, of course, the role of other powers is also very crucial, like the Arab countries, Gulf countries, and really it's a hope that this country will prevail and convince al-Shara that he should not take I mean, that he should take kind of distance from Turkey, that he should not allow Turkey to dictate him how to run the country. But because for the Turkey has not just, the Turkish ambition is not just in Syria, actually. They have this kind of imperial ambition. And even often the Turkish representative claimed that they will also take Jerusalem. So, and this is, so that's why, but the Kurds, they want to eliminate the Kurdish forces, which Turkey consider as kind of opponent and kind of obstacle. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now, I think we have time for maybe one more question here. Now, the Kurds who live in Syria and the situation from the Kurds who live in, say, Turkey or Iraq are quite different. Can you talk about the differences in ambitions and political feelings and just goals overall between Kurds inside of Iraq versus Kurds inside of the new HTS Syria or inside of Turkey?
Yeah, I mean, the Kurds in Iraq, they have already managed to gain certain status. The Iraq is kind of federal state, and they have all this, like according to constitution, they have certain rights, but actually this constitution, but de facto they have many challenges, like the Baghdad, which is under the influence of Iran, makes life very hard to the Kurds. They refuse to pay the salaries for or like the civil servants, and they use the money that they use the money that from the oil in Kurdish region to finance the Hashabi, so this kind of terrorist militia, for example. And despite the legal status that the Kurds as part of, like the constitution recognized, and that Kurdish language, Kurdish existence are fully recognized in Iraq, but in de facto, the things works differently. Even like there was 114 this article which was supposed to be implemented that the Kirkuk belongs to its own original people, but Baghdad regime refused to do that because of Iran, I guess. The Kurds in Syria, they are in emerging states, like they are in it's for the first time that they have the kind of opportunities to determine their life, to shape their life. They have been oppressed permanently, and there were thousands of the Kurds who were stripped of the citizenship, and the Bashar regime, like this kind of, was extremely pan-Arabist, and they considered the Kurds as a threat to his ideology, and the Kurds were persecuted permanently. But since the start of civil war, the Kurds have now more opportunities. They responded to Daesh, they eliminated Daesh militarily. They also fought against the regime elements often. And now they have the proof that the proof that they can be a reliable partner, and they also managed to get the de facto recognition. They have kind of autonomy in the own region. They have a kind of they introduce the model that includes and they promote not only the right of the Kurds, but also another minoritized communities like Christian, the Yazidi, the Assyri communities, but it's not recognized. It's kind of the Yura, they don't have any status right now, but the Kurds are hopeful that will change. So that's why they have negotiation. They try to get the other constitutional recognition. In Turkey, the situation is much different. The Turkish policy since 1920, in my opinion, has not changed. Denial and containment of the Kurds are the strategy of Turkey. Even they started this so-called peace process. They call it Turkey terror-free process. But actually, there's no any reforms or any attempt to recognize the Kurdish rights, to even to recognize the Kurdish language, any rights that the Kurds can express themselves. And but now, as I said, the Turkey tried to contain the Kurds and eliminate the Kurdish voice and integrate them into the broader Turkish society. So, but the Kurds, of course, the Kurds are not the same Kurds, though they have all, the rights. They have extensive awareness of the rights, and they challenge the Turkish policy. And but today we don't have any, or we can't talk of any kind of status that the Kurds can. Even the Turkish Kurdish language. Sometimes when the pro-Kurdish MP, when they talk Kurdish in the Turkish parliament, they immediately cut the voice. They turn off the micro so that because the language, they call it non-known language. And with this peace process, it's not about the peace, because that was also your initial questions. Not that Turkey is really interested to solve the Kurdish issue. The aim to solve the PKK issue. The PKK does not represent the whole Kurdish issue, and the Kurdish issue has the Kurdish conflict has has been here for many hundred years, actually, not just from the 1920s, but even it goes before during Ottoman Empire. And we will see how the Kurds will act. Now, it's also very important that they now shift the method of struggle from armed to peaceful and legal, legitimate means. So that could help so that they gain some rights, but it's very complicated.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much. There's a lot to unpack there, and I wish we had another half hour or maybe another hour. But we have unfortunately reached the end of our podcast for this week. I do want to thank you again, Weysi Dag, for joining us today and for providing your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Now, for those in our audience who would like to follow more of your work and more of your research, is there somewhere where you could direct them, where I could link to and they could follow more of your work?
Yes, I have my social media account at DAGWEYSI, and I post everything there, whatever I publish. Yeah, whether op-ed or journal paper or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, I will be sure to put that link into the video description if you're watching on YouTube, or into the Spotify, Apple, Amazon descriptions if you are listening on those platforms. But for our viewers and listeners, I would like to thank you for your participation, for your viewership, your support, and I would invite you to join us on Wednesday for our Israel Insider podcast with Ashley Perry at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We thank you again, and we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're welcome.